Hey everyone, it's Justin Adkins and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am showing off some brand new Tim Holtz and Sizzix collection dies today for the upcoming Christmas and winter holidays. A huge thank you to scrapbook.com for sending this set of die cuts my way to play with and send you a little bit of inspiration. There are 5 new die sets that are coming out that I was able to play with, and let's get into a little bit about each of them. The first set I'm going to show off is the Vault Christmas Magic die set. This die set has a city skyline with Santa Claus and his reindeer flying overhead. The second set is the Vault Festive Wreath. This die set is going to allow you to create this really fun front door style sort of wreath, and I really love those wax dripped candles as well. That's one of my favorite elements from this set. Our third die set that we're playing with is the Vault Winter Wishes die set. This is only got a couple elements. It's got a snowflake, a snowman, and these little ice skates that I think are just so super cute. And you can actually use twine or string to tie up the ice skates. I just think that's a super fun element. After that, we've got the Vault Seasonal Sketch die set. It has this sketch style poinsettia plant along with a holly leaves and berry die, both in that sketch style. But what I love is that it also contains an alphabet, so you can spell out your own messages and sentiments to include on all of your holiday cards. Finally, we have the last die set I had to play with, which is the Vault Holiday Classic die set. This set contains 3 really fun and stylized sentiments saying wish, peace, and Noel, along with a lot of little elements to use to really jazz up your holiday card. So now that I've introduced all of the sets I've gotten to play with, I thought it'd be fun to use the Holiday Classic and Seasonal Sketch Vault sets to create a card for inspiration. I'm pulling out the Holiday Pattern Paper Collection by scrapbook.com, and I love this holiday confetti print on sort of a cream background. I'm also pulling in the Christmas Smooth cardstock, and I'm going to pull out the red. Along with that, I'm also going to grab the green paper from this, and we're going to use that for some of the elements that we're die cutting from our project. I'm going to use some elements from the Seasonal Sketch Vault set and primarily use the poinsettia plants and the hollyberry leaves. Using some of my 1-inch mint tape, I go and I tack down the dies respectively into their areas on the cardstock. Like I said, I'm using the red and the green from the Smooth Christmas cardstock. I grabbed the silver and I also grabbed the gold metallic cardstock from the holographic mirror paper pack by scrapbook.com because I want to play off of the silver and gold in this set. So you see a little bit of my reflection, not the most flattering of angles, but hey, that's okay. And I'm going to tack down the hollyberry outline die along with the poinsettia plant outline die, both onto some metallic cardstock. I do pull in that little hollyberry die, which I include with the red cardstock, and I can die cut that along with the poinsettia plant. One tip that I like to pass around is that when you are using your die cutting machine and die cutting different papers at once, trim down just the cardstock that you're using and don't feel like you have to put the whole sheet of paper through. I am trimming down each of the areas where my die cuts occupy, and this is really going to help save some real estate on my die cutting mat. Now I am processing this through my die cutting machine a handful of times as I do want multiple shapes, and let me tell you, even though I am using some tape, that magnetic magic mat by scrapbook.com really does what it says, some magic, and helps hold those dies into place. I don't have to worry about them shifting, and then I'm able to throw them into my stack and sort trays for later for my card making. As you're going to see, I do pass the same dies through a couple times on some new paper. This is going to give me multiple die cuts to play with when it comes to creating my card. With the Vault Holiday Classic die set, it's now time to work on the sentiment that I want to use for this card. So as I fidget with the envelope and work to get it open, I decide I want to use the sentiment Noel. I'm pulling out the dark red pattern paper along with the sort of snowfall pink paper, and I'm going to die cut my sentiment from those papers each one time respectively. We're going to come back to my color choice later in this video because I do decide to do something else. Grabbing the rectangles for layering die set from Picket Fence Studios, I use the second largest die to die cut my confetti background. This is going to trim it down really nicely to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, which is going to allow for that really thin sort of frame that I'm going to be able to get around my card as I am creating an A2 size. With my gold metallic holographic mirror paper, I'm going to use the largest die, which is A2 size 4¼ by 5½ from the rectangles for layering die set, and tack that down as well. So I'll die cut my confetti background to get that to the 4⅛ by 5⅝, and then I will die cut my A2 size metallic gold rectangle as well. Of course, it wouldn't be a card with me if it wasn't for a little bit of ink blending, so I am pulling in some vintage photo distress ink, and I'm going to distress the edges of my confetti background. With the cream background of the confetti, it lends itself so perfectly to be used with some vintage photo distress ink because the brown goes really nicely into that cream color. So here you see I'm using just a foam blending tool to go ahead and get that distress ink onto the edges of my card and just make sure I get a really nice sort of coverage so I get some smooth blends, no sort of harsh lines, and I love how it blends onto my panel. Really thought it would be fun to also incorporate some paper splatter, so I'm using some opaque white paper splatter by Picket Fence Studio, which I water down and splatter onto my card with a clean brush. Do use a clean brush when working with whites so you don't deal with cross-contamination. I pull in some liquid gold paper splatter watercolor as well. I do the same process where I go ahead and water it onto my glass surface, and I splatter it with a clean watercolor brush onto my panel, and this is going to give some really pretty gold specks. Because we're also using some silver, I thought it would be appropriate to pull in some liquid silver locket paper splatter watercolor, and I go ahead, I water it just a little bit, pick it up with a clean watercolor brush, doing the same thing I've said twice already, and I splatter it onto my card front to get some little bursts of silver onto my panel. All of these splatters are going to make a huge difference for my final project, and it's going to add really nice little bits of that metallicness to my card. Here you can see it up close, and I just love how it turned out. I grab a paper inking palette by Picket Fence Studios as well. This is 5 by 6 inches, and I put it onto my glass surface. You can see it's definitely well loved, and I put all of my poinsettia plants from the red cardstock onto the panel. I just think that this little tool works so well for ink blending because it really helps hold my die cuts in place and I don't have to worry about fidgeting too much with my fingers. I pull in my Lumberjack Plaid Distress ink, which I distress each of my poinsettia flowers with, and I just am going to go ahead and do the edges of it. I'm not going to worry about the center. This is really going to allow these flowers to look like they've got a nice shading and ombre effect going on. I'm of course going to also blend in those holly berries, which will add into the card in addition to these. I think that this paper inking palette is just a fantastic investment to your craft stash because it makes ink blending so much more easier. Now, after each of my red elements is all nice and ink blended, it is time to move on to the holly leaves. So I put those onto my paper inking palette, and I'm going to then pull in a different color. We're going to use Pine Needles Distress ink, and I'm going to do the same sort of process of just distressing one part of the die cut to get a nice ombre effect. I also want to talk about how much I love these mini ink blending brushes from Altenew. They do the job so nicely when it comes to blending up little die cuts that are on my little paper inking palettes, and I love using these tools. So definitely consider them the next time you're looking to possibly try out a new tool with your stash. As I'm finishing up each of these die cuts, I realize I want them to be super shimmery. So I grab a piece of paper, just standard sort of copy paper from my printer, and I lay out my die cuts on it. The reason that I'm going to be putting this on paper is I just wanted a really easy cleanup as I use my barn door distress spritz on each of my red elements, and this is going to give them just a really nice sparkle. It's also going to make my job cleaning up between takes in this video go a lot smoother. Now for my holly leaves, I lay them out on the same paper, but I space them well enough that there's not going to be too much cross-contamination. When I pull in my peeled paint distress spritz and I put that on the green elements of my card, I just love how it's going to add those really nice sort of metallic bits, and I do decide to use my heat it tool to get them to dry nice and quick for me. Now the next step of my card is a little bit more tedious, but that's okay. That just means we get more chat time so we can talk about some tips and tricks with card making, as I'm going to be using my Misty Precision Glue Press to adhere my Vault Seasonal Sketch die cuts to my panel. I love using my Precision Glue Press to get my elements adhered to my card. This is one of the best investments that I've made in the last year in my crafting stash. I use this tool all the time, and it just is really helpful in getting the right amount of glue onto my die cuts, no matter if they're large die cuts, intricate die cuts, smaller die cuts, you name it, it's going to work so perfectly, and you can use the nozzle that's going to work best for you. I'm also making a little bit of a mistake right now where I'm adhering my holly berries to my card without the outline pieces, so I will correct that later, but just kind of keep that in mind for your own crafting. So once I'm putting my holly berries into place, I am going to then move on to the next portion of my card. And as you can see, I do use my acrylic blocks to hold certain elements in place. But I've got a leftover holly berry leaf, and I'm just going to kind of fill in some gaps with my card using that. And I like to use that as a little bit of a tip. If you're ever trimming off sort of die cuts onto your card because they go off the side, save them because you never know when they may fill in the necessary space on your card. I work with my sentiments from the Vault Holiday Classic die set, which, like I said from earlier, is Noel, and I'm adhering my dark red Noel on top of my light pink Snowfall Noel. And I really like how it looks in general, but when I put it on my card, it doesn't really stand out the way that I want it to. That red kind of bleeds right into the different elements of my card, and I do end up pulling something in later to totally change that. So I start putting my metallic bits and I layer them on top of the respective shapes. These outline pieces are also included with the seasonal sketch vault set that I'm using, so it adds a really nice sort of outline piece, and that metallic paper I'm using really lets each of those die cuts pop. So play around with different colors and textures of pattern papers, because I think that these outline pieces work so nicely with any sort of metallic paper or glitter paper. You might even have some really fun pattern cardstocks that you can use that would fit with this as well. Have fun with it. Maybe even use some non-traditional colors. And also, I do want to talk about, like I had said, did make a little bit of a mistake where I used the holly berries and I adhered them before these sort of outline pieces. Luckily, the glue had not fully set on them yet, so I can kind of lightly pick them up and then put the glue back into place. I also recommend using acrylic blocks to help push different elements of your card down while it's being adhered. I like the bigger the better. If you can find one that's the size of an A2 sized card, you're in good luck. So that's definitely what I'm pulling in. I'm putting each of my little outline pieces into place, and this Misty Precision Glue Press is working its overtime, getting me help to get all of these little die cuts situated. I put my last little die cut piece into place and get it nice and adhered, and once it's all set, I can use my non-stick scissors to trim off the excess. Like I said, save these little bits as you're working on your card. You never know when you can throw them back in just to give a little bit more detail, but just don't get rid of them right away. Here you see me trying to figure out where I want that Noel sentiment to go, and the red just really sort of bleeds in with those poinsettia flowers. So I decide to die cut Noel one more time from some white cardstock, and I decide to adhere it on top of the layer, making my sentiment white, no longer the main color being that dark red. And I know the white is going to pop much better than the red would have because there's not a lot on my card that has white. We've got some white sort of confetti dots, and we've got some white paper splatter from that opaque white that we used. So it's really going to stand out nicely because we've got a lot of reds and greens going on. I decide that I want to place my sentiment in the center with my card in landscape orientation. I usually do portrait style, but for whatever reason, I thought landscape looked really pretty with all of these elements. I use an acrylic block to get my sentiment into place, and I do adhere my whole panel on top of that gold A2 piece I cut earlier in this video. I press everything down, and then I'm able to go ahead and adhere my panel to an A2 sized card. I like to put it on my card base before I put embellishments just in case I fidget with them. I'm using some silver and gold glossy dots by Pink and Main. Pink and Main has some fantastic embellishments, some of my favorite on the market, and these gold and silver glossy dots are by far one of them. I thought it would be really fun to use both of them for the card because we used both silver and gold metallic paper. After I get all of these glossy dots into place, my card is going to be entirely completed and it's going to have so much of that shine and it's going to be ready for the holidays. So there you have it. We're just kind of finishing up where these embellishments get put into place and my card is fully done. I hope this Noel card provides you lots of holiday inspiration with the new Tim Holtz and Sizzix from the Vault collection for this upcoming holiday season. Be sure to use the links below to shop the brand new release on scrapbook.com's website, and I will also have my gallery links below because I made 4 cards using all of these die sets. Thank you once again to scrapbook.com for sending me all of this inspiration, and I hope that it gives you some Christmas fun. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for stopping by, everyone. Goodbye.